We talk about what charges are. We have talked about a fixed charge and a floating charge. And a fixed charge or mortgage is one on some definite or specific property. We talked about that trailer, that logbook for that specific trailer. You take a loan and surrender that logbook to or you have the trust deed. And in the trust deed, you say you are advancing 10 million shillings. For these 10 million shillings, this is the security we are offering. That is 18-wheeler. In case of anything, sell it off to recover your debt. And this fixed charge, once you provide that security, you as the company, you are not allowed to sell it. And this is why we say a charge will be entered. You see, on any transfer, the title must be clean before you transfer any property, whether it's a company or an individual. No one should have a claim on that. But when you get debt financing and that logbook or that parcel of land is given as security, then you cannot again sell the same thing. And in the effect that a company is wound up, that trailer you provided will be sold so that the person who gave you funds, the company, the institution that provided the funds, will be able to be restored to the position they would have been had you been able to meet the interest rate payments as well as the repayment of the principal amount. And a charge can either be legal or equitable. And in a legal one, the full ownership is transferred without necessarily delivering the possession of the mortgage property. And this is where we are saying you do not need to take that trailer and deposit it with the creditor. No. If it's a legal charge, automatically ownership is transferred. And ownership will be transferred back to you as the borrower once you're able to pay the principal amount and the interests. For the equitable mortgage and a charge, it's only the title document that you deposit, but we don't transfer legal ownership. You remember, in equity, we act in utmost good faith. So even if the ownership is not transferred, even if the document has no charge written on it, there is this you and I both behaving in the best way possible that you will pay off your debt and you will not go and get a forged title document. The one that I have remains is the only one that is in use for that particular trailer we are talking about. So what is a floating charge? We have Illingworth versus Hulsworth, where a floating charge is shifting in its nature. It's hovering and floating with the property with which it is intended to affect until some event occurs or an act is done that causes it to settle and fasten in the subject of the charge within its reach. It's an equitable charge on the assets of the company, for the time being a going concern. The issue is that it needs to be seen to be able to continue in the foreseeable future. This is why floating charges are issued. And as we've said, it doesn't relate to a specific property. We're not going to identify the trailer, the piece of land, but should circumstances change and the company ceases to be a going concern, it will attach itself on any property that is subject to a fixed charge. but it may be limited to a class. So the very essence is that it remains dormant until the company stops being a going concern. And this is where we were saying the company can sell off property that may have been used to gather a debt. The company can use whatever properties they had used as security. And the only thing is that the company must be a going concern. Once it stops being a going concern, then the floating charge no longer floats. It has to affix itself to a certain property in order for it to be recovered. And Section 1 of the 4 of the Act imposes an important condition for the validity of a floating charge, created within 12 months, immediately preceding the commencement of winding up. And it says that this charge shall be invalid unless the company immediately after the creation of the charge was insolvent, and if the company received cash actually at the time of or after the creation of the charge in consideration thereof. Because of this nature of a floating charge, the Act prohibits the 12 months before proceedings of winding up are made. You cannot floating charge, save for the two exceptions where immediately after the creation of the charge, the company was insolvent, or the company received cash, or there was consideration. Then that's the only time the floating charge will be accepted. This is because more often than not, the company, the directors are able to see whether the company is making profits or not. And while we say again, directors are held by a fiduciary duty, it doesn't often work that way. And where the company, and they are aware that this company is about to cease operations, they may create debts, they may advance debts, but they are aware if the company winds up, then they'll attach on assets, fraudulent dealings. This is the Act is specific. Within 12 months, no floating charge shall be issued, because to avoid the mischief of creating a floating charge that will be affected, that will affix itself on a specific property. So what are the rules of relating to floating charges? So we have said it operates as an immediate or continuing charge, and the company is able to do whatever it needs to do with its assets. There are no prohibitions. It does not stop subsequent specific mortgages. You can have a floating charge, then you have a fixed charge. So this floating charge is very flexible. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop you from borrowing more based on the same assets. And it's valid against the unsecured creditors, whether in winding up or otherwise. Just because it's a floating charge does not mean that you will not get paid. And this is where we are saying, once the company ceases to be a going concern, the element of it crystallizing comes up. So where we have chattels in the company's possession and a hire purchase agreement, under which the goods that remain the property of the supplier, the rights of the owners prevail on floating charge created by the company, even if the chattels become fixtures. So anything under hire purchase and the goods remain the property of the supplier, but the owner's rights prevail over floating charge. these floating charges do not supersede the rights of an owner in such agreements. The rights of owner supersede any other floating charge that may be in its place. So we have talked about the crystallization of a floating charge. And what do we mean by crystallization? This is when it fixes or fastens on some particular property for any reason, and it becomes a fixed charge. Once it becomes a fixed charge, how? When a company goes into liquidation, the company is no longer a going concern. And this is whether or not the company is in default of to the holder of the charge. It doesn't matter if there's a likelihood of default. As long as the company has gone into liquidation, the floating charge crystallizes. Again, when a receiver is appointed to a company, when a company is in default or commits other breaches on the terms of the debentures, and the lenders take some steps to realize the property charge, this charge is also said to crystallize. We said debenture, the trust deed provides the terms and conditions, and it provides that if the debenture holders feel that their interests are not being paid on time, there is no repayment, they can appoint a receiver. This receiver, once appointed, any floating charge automatically crystallizes to become a fixed charge. Again, we have talked of a company ceasing to be a going concern. That is, it's just your business. Also, when a creditor takes possession of assets subject to the charge through seizure or under power of seizure or license, you've seen such instances where KRA comes and takes some assets or some goods due to non-failure of paying these the taxes. So where there is any seizure of any assets, the floating charge crystallizes into a fixed charge. Again, it can also crystallize when the charge is converted into a fixed charge. The company and the debenture holder agree, we want to secure this further by identifying a specific asset and fixing the charge over that specific asset. So we talked about we have two types of charges, legal and equitable, and we've said legal fixed charges rank according to their order of creation. And if an equitable fixed charge, that is that informal mortgage by deposit, is created first and a legal charge is created, again, the legal charge takes priority. And a floating charge will be postponed to a later fixed charge over the same property. What we are saying is a floating charge may have been, the debt may have been acquired earlier. Say you acquire the debt today using a floating charge. Then 6 months later, you have a fixed charge. And on this fixed charge, that title deed is attached to the fixed charge. The fixed charge outranks the floating charge, despite the floating charge having been acquired faster. Then we have if two floating charges are created, they rank in order of creation. So these are specifically for floating charges. If it's a floating and a fixed takes priority. Two floating charges, the one that is created today and another one 3 months later, the one for today takes priority. It leads. So again, we talked of the registration of charges, and this is under Section 96(6) of the Companies Act, where every company is required to keep at its registered office a register of all floating charges, specifically affecting the property of the company. And the purpose is to enable a would-be creditor to know their company's existing indebtedness and the assets available for their settlement. It's to make the public aware, as well as their creditor, so that they make a decision. Are they willing to, again, add more money to this company? Or does the company look like it will not be able to fulfill its debts? So what do we do when there's a non-registration of charges? And the charge will be void against the liquidator or any other creditor of the company, and a debt would remain valid but unsecured. Registering a charge, then it's like it's attached to anything. It's like the you present, and you see, once you lose, that's the only thing they had that had proof you could pay off a debt. So if it's not registered, it becomes unsecured. And the money which the charge purports to secure becomes immediately payable. And any person in default is liable to a penalty for every day during which the default continues. So registration is as per Section 96, and the effect is as we have said, especially in terms of ranking, and especially in terms of ensuring that the debt is paid.